If there's one thing I really enjoy doing in my life, it's reflecting. I often find myself reflecting on the past, and sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes I'm reflecting about what I can change, how I can be a better person. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'm looking at the past and I'm feeling bad for myself or feeling sorrowful for things that have taken place. But as I've reflected and as I've thought about the things that have transpired in my life, every time I go back and look at my experiences, I learn something new. And one of the experiences I particularly enjoy learning from is when I left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon church. I like to look back on it and think about why I did what I did and how I eventually overcame that. And throughout the whole process, I learned a lot about myself, and I kind of wanted to speak on that today. Why I originally left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and my perspective on it after coming back to the church, and all the things that I've realized from being on the different sides of this experience. As I've reflected on my experience, especially recently, I've come to realize that a big part of the puzzle of me leaving the church was pridefulness. And this is something that I'm still working on. But it was me assuming that I know better. That I know better than a God who loves me eternally and wanted to keep me safe. And I think it's a dangerous slope, because pride is a sin that I feel is easily hidden with what some might think is virtue, or even what some might think is really freedom. But from my own experiences, the freedom that the world offers is not. It's not freedom. It's a really deep, dark prison, and it's a cycle. When I left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I had always visioned everyone in the church judging me. And it was so vivid that I convinced myself that people were looking at me differently because of the things that were in my heart. But they can't see the things that are in my heart. I subconsciously judged them and envisioned that they were subject to some sort of indoctrination, that I was the one who was finally figuring things out. And it's a very humbling experience to look back on that and to see how wrong I was. Of course, judgmental people can be found in any group or denomination, but no one was judging me. No one was looking at me and thinking of me as anything other than a child of God with infinite potential. But I convinced myself that people were, and I convinced myself that I knew better, that somehow I had come to the knowledge that people who are much smarter than me, much brighter, I convinced myself that I now had the fullness of truth, while they were stuck in something that wasn't real. And I think a big part of pride is not only the enmity, the smarter than thou approach of it. I think a big part of it is the lack of respect for authority. And the biggest authority is God. So when you start to view yourself as smarter than God, it's prideful. And it's the want to have power over yourself. And I think a big part of this life is being willing to submit to the will of God, and to be humble and saying, I don't know everything. In my experience, I believe something that played a big role into it was seeking the confirmation of the world and the things I was doing. I didn't care in particular what God thought of me or how I stood with God and Jesus Christ. What I cared about was the social hierarchy of the world and how I could become more seen in that aspect. And it's very intriguing to me because I had spiritual experiences before I decided to leave the church. And I even had spiritual experiences when I was outside of the church that I just oftentimes blatantly ignored because of the pridefulness and because of what I wanted to follow. It was because of the desire I had in my heart that I chose to chase after those things. I think I also had the idea in my head of kind of procrastination almost, where it was the idea that I could return later, that I could continue in the things I was doing, and in the end, everything will be okay. Which is, I think it's such an interesting idea because it's kind of a trap. I convince myself that it's okay in the moment, that I'm happy, and then I convince myself that I'm going to be okay later without the need of that change of desire and without having to change the actions that I was doing. And that's also dangerous because there's this gift of the gospel that I had that I decided not to take advantage of and to not share to those whom it can really help, because there are people in the world who don't know any better. And the fact of the matter is that I knew better but did nothing with it. And for the rest of my life, I want to do something with it. I think to illustrate this point better, it stuck out to me as I was reading in the scriptures. A few verses really stuck out to me, and they outline these different ideas. It outlines the unwillingness to follow the commandments of God and kind of what happens when you go down that path. And it's very intriguing to me because this entire chapter is a mistake. Not a mistake in that, it's in the scriptures by mistake, but it's a mistake as in when this man, Moroni, was writing this letter to the general, he didn't fully grasp what was going on in the main city. The basis for this letter is Moroni writing a letter to a city leader, Pahoran, and he's essentially getting after him and saying, hey, we need help. Like, we need food, we need provisions, we need people. What's going on? Have you forgotten us? Have you betrayed us? Because he doesn't understand why there's not any help being given. And in the chapter after this, when Pahoran writes him back, and Pahoran is actually a great example of humility because he says, hey, I love your enthusiasm and I love your heart and what you are striving for this people, and he acknowledges that. But a group of people have overthrown the city that Pahoran was in charge of, so he can't send anything. And Moroni didn't know that. So I think it's interesting to read this story and to think about why this long letter was included when it can simply be summarized as just a misunderstanding. And as I was looking into it, I was looking at it through the lens of pride. I was looking at it through the lens of Moroni speaking to me when I was out of the church. And the whole chapter is is very good and insightful when you read through and envision Moroni kind of getting on your case and saying, hey, you should be doing better. You can be doing better. You know better. But a few verses that particularly stuck out to me and that kind of outline what I was just discussing are verses 20 through 22. And this is in Alma chapter 60 in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is just another testament of Jesus Christ, and I have a full video about that you can watch. But it states, "Have ye forgotten the commandments of the Lord your God? Yea, have ye forgotten the captivity of our fathers? Have ye forgotten the many times we have been delivered out of the hands of our enemies? Or do ye suppose that the Lord will still deliver us, while we sit upon our thrones, and do not make use of the means which the Lord has provided for us? Yea, will ye sit in idleness, while ye are surrounded with thousands of those, yea, tens of thousands, who do also sit in idleness, while there are thousands round about in the borders of the land, who are falling by the sword, yea, wounded and bleeding? Do you suppose that God will look upon you as guiltless while you sit still and behold these things? Behold, I say unto you, Nay. I would that ye should remember that God has said that the inward vessel shall be cleansed first, and then shall the outer vessel be cleansed also." In that last verse, he's talking about the government, specifically to Pahoran, that the government will be cleansed to keep the country cleansed. But I think it's interesting to envision it as yourself, that your desire will be cleansed and changed. Your desire has to be cleansed and changed before your outward actions can. But I think this scripture really emphasizes how I look back on being outside of the church. It was idleness, and it was that I had forgotten the commandments of God, that I chose to take the importance of those things and just throw it away. And I can say confidently that the most important decision I've ever made is that of coming back to the Church of Jesus Christ, the restored Church of Jesus Christ. I was in a very dark place, physically, mentally, spiritually, when I was outside of the church. And the way that God can take whatever you are dealing with and turn it around is truly amazing. I know that from my first-hand experience. I'd encourage those of you who have stuck around to watch this video to reflect on the things that you're doing, to reflect on why you're actually doing them and what your end goal is. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, if you feel that it helped you, be sure to share it with a friend or comment down below, and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. See you guys.